Hi. I'm Kim Spillers. We're just having a little pre-show fun here.
And I'm Frank Spillers, and this is Rural Community Solutions.
We would love to welcome you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us wherever you're watching or wherever you're listening. What we do with Rural Community Solutions is help you in rural America design family-friendly, youth-centered places. And what we're going to be talking about is all kinds of new words for you to think about and why are they important for your rural community.
So what does community, unify, and paradigm all have in common? Stay tuned.
We'll be right back. So listen to this message.
Rural Community Solutions. Picture, if you will, the pure, raw prairie. No wires, no fences, no roads, not even a farmhouse. No sign of civilization. This is what a person saw that was crossing the prairie in a wagon more than 170 years ago. They jumped off the wagon, looked around, and declared, "This is where I want to settle and build a town. A great place to live and a great place to raise my family." So they took a risk. They built a house made out of the land, planted food to eat, and cared for the land. Then they wrote back to their friends where they came from and described the great opportunity and promise that they have found. They invited who they knew to join them in their discovery, people they had a relationship with, and so they came, family by family, and those families invited others they knew, who they wanted to live with within that community. The communities grew because the needs of the families grew, so entrepreneurs started businesses to meet those community needs. Ice houses, broom factories, general stores, and many other types of sole proprietor entrepreneurial businesses started up within the community. All of our communities across this country, all around the world, were started in this way, with a vision of the future and a plan to grow with people.
So what does that have to do with anything in your life? Well, what we think at Rural Community Solutions is that we're at a wonderful place in history where we can reimagine and we can redo our communities very similarly, but with all kinds of advancements, of course, because we are many hundreds of years ahead of where the communities were originally formed. But we've got some great opportunities to put into place and for you to consider and think about. So as we design family-friendly, youth-centered places, what we do is we intentionally go about attracting people. And we do this by identifying and growing with your community's culture, in its people, its place, and its economy. So we're going to talk a little bit today about those terms that Frank talked about before we listened to that piece on how your community got to be.
So let me take you back just a little bit to the late 1990s. So it's when I worked for USDA Rural Development as the director of the Office of Community Development, and I would travel the state of Iowa in my car, going to small rural communities. In fact, for more than 30 years, I have been working with small rural communities across the Midwest on how to develop those communities. And what I have found out is that it's not by the projects those communities are developed, it's by the people and the relationships. And so our philosophy and our formulation of how we help rural communities has been formed by on the ground, over the years experience on what we have observed and how we have helped communities and businesses grow. So one time I was in a small rural community and I was giving a community presentation, helping that community organize itself, organize its thoughts, organize where it's going to go, organize its vision of what it really wanted to be. And in the crowd, of course, was the newspaper editor. Now, this wasn't any ordinary newspaper editor. It turns out that this newspaper editor, not at that time, but he would become a Pulitzer Prize winning newspaper editor. He had dubbed me, after he listened to me working with that community, he dubbed me
the Zig Ziglar of rural development. Now, rural development is a small r, small d, not of the agency. So I just wear that title with pride because, one, if you know Zig Ziglar and have followed him, you know what a phenomenal man he was and what he could do to help people, to build them up from the ground up, to raise them up. And that was his philosophy. How could he do that? And so, as I am the Zig Ziglar of rural development, coming into communities, helping to build people. And we have created our philosophy on our 4 pillars of how do we help those rural communities: relationships, engagement, collaboration, and entrepreneurship. And you take all 4 of those pillars, lift up that community, support it, and it is an entrepreneurial economy and building wealth within that community. So how do we do that? And what does that mean? What can we do to really put some fire within rural communities and rural development? And if you have been on the show this week, following us, you have heard me have this quote. This is from Charles F. Kettering. Now, Charles Kettering was an inventor. He was an entrepreneur, but he invented a system in your car that you will love. He invented the electric starter. All right. So it was his company was Delco. If you remember that, Delco now I think is incorporated with Ford Motor Company, but Delco had the electric starter, and that was Charles Kettering's invention. Let me tell you one thing. He invented the electric starter on a napkin at a coffee shop. We've seen it. It was framed at the Kettering Foundation, where we're fellows from, but it's in a frame at the Kettering Foundation where his estate was, and it's just a cocktail napkin. That's how he created his company. So never, ever, ever discount an entrepreneur, because they'll use whatever is handy to them as they use. But his quote, he goes, "I'm interested in the future because that is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life." And think about that. Where are you spending the rest of your life? Was it yesterday? Or is it going to be tomorrow and the next day and in the future? What are you planning for? Do you planning for what you're doing right now? Or do you sit and think about, what am I going to be doing in the future? Who am I going to become? How am I going to get there? What am I going to do? A vision is a picture of the future you wish to create. And so that's the future you wish to create. And here at Rural Community Solutions, we help you do that. And we're helping you do that by building people up. We're not focused on your project. Projects are important because you need to create that community of life. Remember, we focus on people, your quality of place, and your economy. And we look at all of those and we go, how are they doing? And you answer those questions, and we help you with those questions and with those answers. But you look at your community and you see what? Well, first of all, you have to identify what your community is, right? So back a little bit up, define what your community is. Now, Webster, in their infinite wisdom, has defined community in this way. Community is a unified body of individuals, such as the people with common interests living in a particular area. Now, let's go back to the opening video of the show. Here's a guy. Here's a family, okay?
Probably a family.
Yeah, probably a family.
Probably a family.
Maybe not. Maybe back then it might have been the guy, and then he's going to call for his family, okay? Anyway, here's this person on a wagon, looks out over the landscape, and sees open prairie. No fences, nothing.
No roads.
Just open prairie. Jumps off and goes, this is where I'm going to start my community. And that's where he started his house. He built his house there. And most likely in the Midwest here, it was made out of sod because they didn't have any trees. Mm-hmm. So he built a sod house, a soddy, as we call it out here in the Midwest. They're soddy. and built that, and then invited people he knew out to join him from his old community. So a community is a unified body of individuals that have a common interest living in a particular area. So you look around in your town. So it doesn't have to be blocked or stopped by your city limits. Okay, don't let those be a barrier, your city limits. Your community is a region. And your workforce comes from different communities. So you have a workforce community that commutes in, workforce community that commutes out, and goes to different places. So we need to keep the region strong. It also describes a community as a group of people with a common characteristic or interest living together within a larger society. All right. So as you take that, that can be a community of interest. So you as educators, you as the teachers out there, as moms, as homeschool parents these days, you have a community of like interests. You have a society of those folks having of like interests. So that's a different type of community. But here today, we're going to concentrate on the community of people in a living within an area that have a common interest, a generalized community that you would have. All right. So that's a community. Now, your next definition, we're going to school today, right? And we're at home. So I guess we're homeschooling.
We're homeschooling.
All right.
We are homeschooling. Yes.
And here is the next definition is unify. What is unify? So you take that definition as unify is to make into a unit, all right? To take different parts and make into a unit of a coherent whole. You unite. So you take the different parts and you create a whole unit out of them. Unify is to cause people or things. We're going to be talking about people. So to cause people to be joined or brought together, and to be joined or brought together into a single unit or group. That is to unify. So when you unify a community, you are bringing people together of common interest from a particular group in a particular area to unite them in a single unit or group. All right. And so that is a coming together, a bringing together of what that has to be. And how do we do that? How do we do that? Well, we're going to introduce you to a new word tonight.
It's a great word.
This is
I love this.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what the picture of this word would look like. So if you have ideas, be sure and let us know.
So yeah, she right before the show, she said it needs a cape.
I think it needs a cape. So you see what you think.
So here we go. But the word is
Communifier.
What is a communifier? Well, our definition of communifier is one that unifies a community. So you even take community. When we have community in rural community solutions, you will notice that unity is italicized, bolded, and underlined, because it's the unity of a community that is the very essence, the very foundation of creating community wealth and building community and becoming that communifier, that spark plug that creates that spark, that gets the people together, that moves them forward in a single purpose, is one of the most important parts, one of the most important roles that you can do in a community, being that communifier.
Now, I have to say that as you look at the banner, if you're watching this, Rural Community Solutions doesn't have the italics and the underline, but that's because the program won't allow it. But we just wanted to point that out, and that is the belief that we have is unity is critical to community.
So what does this mean for a community and unification, unifier, communifier? What does that mean to Zig Ziglar? What does that mean to somebody that would come in and be a motivational coach. Now, hear me out here just a second. I want you to place yourself in a business. Have you ever been in business, or maybe just as an individual, have you ever gone to a self-improvement seminar? Sat through it, had the person on the stage really fire you up, and then all of a sudden you leave and you don't go back, and your motivation starts to wane over time. Well, we've been on the stage, we've been at that program, we've been in the community, in an organization, a workshop where we've had multiple community members in that community. So if we've done a state workshop, people from all over that state, wherever we were at that particular time in the nation, people from all over that state would come in and they would listen to us, and they would come up afterwards and they go, oh man, I really know who needs to hear this, and they couldn't come. We have people back home that needed to hear this whole message. I need to bottle you up, put you in my pocket, take you to my community, and you need to tell our community this.
Because I can't.
The community wouldn't listen to the insider.
Right,
Okay.
Exactly. The person who has the paid position, they know exactly what to say. They know they can see things that need to change. But people from the inside, they have to protect their job. And so there is some value in having an outside perspective and get the message across that people know needs to be said. And so that is maybe why a Communifier would be a valuable piece for your community.
And because it is, you bring in somebody from 50 miles away with a briefcase, they're always the expert. Okay. And so that's the other piece of that. But thinking about that, they come to that workshop and they get all sorts of education. They get motivated. We just don't motivate. I mean, we give you sound information, sound systems that you can take back of how you can build your people. And we give you sound reasons why to do that. And so for the next 3 days, for today, tomorrow, on Thursday and Friday, we're going to be going over this process of why you need to do that. And you need to do that because people need their self-esteem built. You go to a motivation seminar to build your self-esteem, to build yourself up. You need to change your thoughts. You know that more than 75% of the thoughts that you think, or that the thoughts and the information that comes at you on a daily basis is negative. So you're fighting negative information all the time. And with that, you're fighting your negative thoughts. And so you go to these seminars, you go to workshops, and you listen to these people, or you go on even on YouTube and you start to listen to these speeches and the motivational speeches. You get that feeling inside of you, and you can feel it start to build up and well up. And pretty soon you're just feeling good, and you're going out and you can conquer the world. Well, that's self-esteem. That's self-confidence. And that is the number one factor in success of building people up, is building their self-confidence, their self-esteem. It's the number one factor in success. So if you're even managing people, if you're listening to this and you're managing people, build people up, the self-esteem. That's your number one avenue towards success. The other reason why you need to build people is that you will never outperform your self-image, right? So you view yourself in a certain way. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? You view yourself in a certain way. Well, you're never going to outperform that self-image. Also, you always perform as you see yourself, right? So you are performing at a level that you see yourself. Now, let me put this into community perspective. What is the self-esteem of your community? Do you have a good self-esteem? Do you build your community up? Do people trash it? What's your thought process around there? What are your conversations around there? How do people really actually feel about your community that you live in? So if you leave your community and you're driving back into your community, your first thought should be, I wonder what the image of this community is. You can tell a community image by its entrances. if the community image doesn't have a really good image of itself, and I'm talking about the image it sees of itself within the people that are there, not the physical buildings, not the physicalness of that. However, that is a reflection of how people think about your community. All right. And so as you're thinking about what is our community image, do people build up your self-image in your community, or do they tear it down all the time? That's what we do. That's how we attack community development. That's how we attack that community. That's how we look at a vision, is how do you get people organized? How do you get them unified in an organization to move forward in a coherent way that makes sense towards a common vision? Now, it's that common vision that creates excitement. We have found that communities that do not have a good self-image and a good self-esteem, they do not have hope in the future. So listen to your community and look at your demographics. Look at your trend lines. Are you losing a young demographic? Are they moving away? Are parents telling their children to move away and find a good job? Are you, as a chamber official or economic developer, are you hearing from your membership, or are you hearing from your community, my kids would move back if they had a good job? If you're hearing that, then that is the conversation going around. That is the talk about the image of your community. It's not the fact about going to get a job. It's the fact of creating hope, creating opportunity, and creating a diversified economy within your community that entrepreneurship can take place. That's building that economy. It all starts with self-image. It all starts with self-improvement. And it all starts with, how do you motivate your people and you work with your people to unify, to come together in a community? And how do you become that communifier and that spark plug that's really going to make a difference in your community?
So one of the things that we do, just to give an illustration of who that person might be, is when we travel across the country, when we stop for gas, or, you have to stop for convenience purposes and get some snacks and things like that, we will talk to the people who are behind the front desk. We'll talk, if we've gone into a restaurant, we'll talk to the waitress, we'll talk to a number of different people and just ask them, what's it like to live here? What's good? What's happening around here? Those kinds of people can be communifiers. And the message that you want them to be able to communicate on behalf of your community is you want it to be a good message. Interestingly enough, the majority of people who answer that question, what's it like to be here? What's going on around here that's really good? Most of the people often say, oh gosh, I can't wait to get out of here. Or no, the things aren't good around here. And so us as travelers, that gives us an impression. And so that is an example of what a communifier could do for your community, either to benefit it or perhaps to give an impression that you don't want for your community and the traveling public to take away. So there's reason to work with people who are on those front lines and to be able to get a message across to them, to train them to be able to put people in place who are going to give a great message about community and unity for your town.
Now, you have a prime example, a prime opportunity here of how are you going to emerge out of COVID. One of the, it's kind of a opposite, a good and bad thing of a crisis. A crisis seems to unify a community, right? And so we need to learn how to unify without the crisis taking place. We need to make that a part of our cultural habit. How do we unify and come together? But it seems that that crisis of a crisis will unify a community, and so we have the opportunity to say, how are you going to come out of the COVID crisis? How are you coming out on the other side? You know how you went in. You know what you were up against. You know the projects you were doing. You know the processes. You know the trend lines. We don't want to go back to where we were. You hear a lot of that talk of let's get back to normal. I don't know if you want to get back to normal. If you're a rural community and you're saying, I want to get back to normal, then you're going to end up in the same spot you left off, right? What we're looking for are communities that want to unify and take advantage of the opportunities that you can do right now to come out on the other side, because we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. In about 6 months, hopefully 3 to 6 months, we can be back at really starting to emerge and come together and see people, come out of our houses, come out wherever you are.
Yes.
All right. So as we can take those opportunities and create a community, we need to step back and also then plan. All right. It's an intentional process of how you are going to come out. What are you going to be doing? What's your economy like? You have to know where you're at right now to know your future. So we really want you to think about, where do you live? All right. Are you interested in the future? Because that's where you're going to spend the rest of your life, like Charles Kettering. Or are you interested in the past? Are you constantly looking in the rearview mirror and say, that's the way we have always done it. It's always been that way. That's the way we're going to do it again. And because you do that, you're going to get the same results. But if you look at the rearview mirror and you say, that's where we were, now where are we going? And you look at your windshield, the windshield is much bigger than your rearview mirror. So you look out at your future and you say, that's where I'm going, and you have that clear picture of where you want to go. Then you start to put actions into that and you start to create that picture. If you don't have a clear picture of where you want to go, you need to create one. Right. And so that's what at Rural Community Solutions we would suggest that you start to do, is to create that vision. We're going to be talking about, for the next couple of weeks until the end of the year, we're going to be talking about how to get there, how to use your people. What are some of the trends that you need to look at? How can we help you really capitalize upon the opportunities that you have in 2021? So stay with us. Come back Monday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time at Rural Community Solutions TV live stream on our YouTube channel, Rural Community Solutions on our Facebook page, or go to our podcast at anchor.fm/Frank Spillers, and you can get our podcast, Think Like an Entrepreneur, Become a Spark Plug. I might change that to Unifier, Communifier. I don't know. I have become a Communifier, or that could become that spark plug. But Think Like an Entrepreneur. And that is the podcast of our daily show that you can get.
So thank you so much for joining us wherever you have been watching or are watching, or wherever you're listening and whatever you're doing. We hope that this has given you some things to think about. We absolutely believe in rural America and its potential, and we hope that you do too. So give us a shout. Tell us what you think about Communifier, and especially if you have some ideas for what that image might be.
So where are you going to be living the rest of your life? I'm going to the future. And I'm Frank Spillers.
And I'm Kim Spillers. Thank you so much for joining Rural Community Solutions. We hope that you have a fabulous day and week.
Have a great day.
Take
See
care.
you tomorrow. Bye-bye.